It's June 1984. You're standing on Fifth Avenue, New York City. The summer air is warm. Yellow taxis race past. Steam curls out of the sewers on the streets. The city feels alive. People are heading home after another busy day at work. Restaurants are packed. Sidewalks are crowded. It's just another ordinary night until something very strange happens. You push open the heavy wooden doors of the New York Public Library. The building is almost empty. Your footsteps echo across the marble floor. Rows and rows of books disappear into the darkness. The silence feels different, almost as if someone else is here. A librarian slowly rolls a cart through the stacks of books. Suddenly, books begin sliding off the shelves, all by themselves. One after another after another. She freezes, looks around, then, at the far side of the aisle, she sees it. A ghost. Not frightening, not terrifying, just impossible. She screams, and in that single moment, movie history begins. That unforgettable opening scene introduced audiences to a movie unlike anything they'd ever seen before. It wasn't horror. It wasn't science fiction, it wasn't an action movie, and it certainly wasn't an ordinary comedy. It somehow managed to be all of those things at exactly the same time. But here's something most people don't know. The original version of Ghostbusters looked absolutely nothing like the movie we all remember. There was no firehouse, no Ecto-1, no New York Public Library, no Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. In fact, the Ghostbusters didn't even live in our world. So, how did one of the most beloved movies of the 1980s transform from a wild science fiction idea into one of the greatest comedies ever made? Well, our story begins long before anyone strapped on a proton pack. It begins with a family that believed ghosts were real. Long before Dan Aykroyd became one of the biggest comedy stars at the box office, he grew up hearing stories that most children never did. Ghost stories. Not the kind told around the campfire. Real stories. His family had a genuine interest in the paranormal. His great-grandfather experimented with radios, hoping they might communicate with spirits. Other family members attended seances. Discussions about ghosts, psychic phenomena, and unexplained events weren't as unusual in the Aykroyd household. For Dan, the supernatural wasn't just simply entertainment, it was fascinating. As he grew older, he began reading books about haunted houses, ghost hunters, and strange encounters from around the world. Years later, those childhood interests would quietly become the foundation for one of Hollywood's most successful films. But first, Dan needed an idea. Imagine trying to explain the original Ghostbusters script to a movie studio. It wasn't set in modern-day New York. It wasn't even set on planet Earth. It wasn't even set on one planet. Ghostbusters traveled between dimensions. They fought supernatural creatures across entire universes. Ghosts were everywhere. Entire cities depended on professional ghost hunters. The movie was enormous. Massive action scenes, hundreds of ghosts, endless special effects. It would have cost a fortune to film, especially in the early 1980s. The screenplay was imaginative, wild, completely original, and almost impossible to produce. Fortunately, Dan Aykroyd had someone very important reading those pages, a fellow writer and comedian named Harold Ramis. Harold immediately saw something special. Buried underneath all the science fiction was a fantastic comedy, but he also recognized a problem. The script was simply too big. Together, Aykroyd and Ramis began cutting, simplifying, reshaping. Instead of setting the story in the future, they moved it to present-day New York. Instead of dozens of Ghostbusters, they focused on a small team. Instead of a complicated science fiction, they grounded the movie in more recognizable places: apartment buildings, hotels, libraries, neighborhood streets. The supernatural would invade the ordinary, and somehow that made it even funnier, because audiences could imagine it happening in their own city. The movie suddenly felt believable. Well, as believable as a 30-foot marshmallow man could be. There was just one more missing piece. Someone had to direct this impossible idea. That someone was Ivan Reitman. Reitman had already directed successful comedies, but this would be unlike anything he had ever attempted. He understood something that became the secret to the entire movie. The actors couldn't behave as if they were making a comedy. They had to treat ghosts, slime, and supernatural chaos as though it were completely normal. The jokes wouldn't come from the ghosts, they'd come from the people reacting to them. That decision changed everything. It gave Ghostbusters its unique tone. Dry, deadpan, completely believable, even when absolutely unbelievable things were happening. Now, the script was ready, the director was ready, the city of New York was ready. There was just one problem. The Ghostbusters didn't exist yet. Who could possibly play four ordinary men convincing audiences that they could save New York from the supernatural? The answer would change comedy history. In late 1983, the script had been transformed. The story was tighter, the setting had moved to modern-day New York. The comedy was sharper. Ivan Reitman was ready to direct. There was just one problem. Who exactly was going to save New York City? Today, it's impossible to imagine anyone but Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, and Ernie Hudson wearing those beige jumpsuits. But believe it or not, that legendary team almost looked very different. In the earliest stages of development, Dan Aykroyd had another comedian in mind, his close friend John Belushi. The two had become stars together on Saturday Night Live. Their chemistry was undeniable. Belushi's wild energy seemed perfect for a movie about chasing ghosts. In many ways, Dan imagined the project with John standing beside him. But in March of 1982, everything changed. Belushi died unexpectedly at the age of just 33. Hollywood was stunned. His friends were devastated. For Dan Aykroyd, it was deeply personal. The loss forced the filmmakers to rethink the movie entirely. Ghostbusters would move forward, but it would never be quite like the movie Dan had first imagined. Sometimes the stories behind our favorite films are shaped just as much by loss as they are by inspiration. Now the filmmakers faced another challenge. They wanted Bill Murray. There was only one problem. Getting Bill Murray to commit to a movie has never been easy. Even in the early 1980s, he was famous for doing things his own way. He rarely rushed into projects. He didn't sign on simply because everyone expected him to. He had to believe in it. Ivan Reitman knew one thing for certain. Without Murray, something important would be missing. Peter Venkman wasn't supposed to be the fearless action hero. He was a wisecracking psychologist, a man who walked into terrifying situations armed mostly with confidence and sarcasm. Eventually, Bill Murray said yes, and the moment he did, the entire movie changed. Because once the cameras started rolling, the script became more of a suggestion than a rule. Bill Murray has always been one of Hollywood's great improvisers. Rather than simply memorizing every line, he liked to play, to experiment, to surprise everyone, including his fellow actors. Some of Peter Venkman's funniest moments weren't planned at all. Little reactions, quick one-liners, dry expressions, tiny pauses. Those moments gave Ghostbusters its unique personality. The ghosts were extraordinary, but the Ghostbusters themselves felt wonderfully ordinary. They joked, they argued, they questioned everything, exactly the way real people probably would. And because the actors seemed to be having so much fun, audiences felt like they were part of the adventure too. But every great team needs balance, and Harold Ramis played Egon Spengler, the brilliant scientist whose mind was always one step ahead, quiet, logical, completely fascinated by the paranormal. Dan Aykroyd became Ray Stantz, the eternal optimist, a man so excited by ghosts he practically smiled every time one appeared. Then there was Winston Zeddemore, played by Ernie Hudson. Unlike the others, Winston wasn't driven by science. He wasn't chasing fame, he simply needed a job. And somehow, that made him one of the most relatable characters in the film. When someone asks if he believes in ghosts, his answer is perfect. If there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe anything you say. That one line tells you everything you need to know about Winston. He's the audience, dropped into the middle of complete supernatural chaos. Together, the four actors created something that can't be manufactured: chemistry. It felt less like four performers reading lines and more like four friends trying to solve an impossible problem. Of course, every hero needs memorable people around them. Sigourney Weaver brought intelligence and warmth to Dana Barrett. Rick Moranis turned Louis Tully into one of the funniest neighbors in movie history. It's almost impossible to watch him nervously talking to his party guests without smiling. And then there was Annie Potts as Janine Melnitz. She could deliver more personality with one raised eyebrow than most actors could in an entire scene. Her sharp wit and unmistakable New York attitude made the Ghostbusters headquarters feel like a real workplace. Everyone had a role. Everyone had a purpose. No character felt wasted. One of the smartest decisions Ivan Reitman made was refusing to build an artificial version of New York. Instead, he took Ghostbusters directly into the city. They filmed on the busy sidewalks, real neighborhoods, outside famous landmarks. The cast often found themselves surrounded by curious crowds. People stopped what they were doing just to watch. No one had ever seen actors wearing strange backpacks, running through Manhattan, pretending to chase invisible ghosts. Some spectators laughed, others simply stared, wondering what on earth they were watching. Little did they know they were witnessing the birth of one of the most beloved movies of the decade. There was just one catch. The release date had already been announced. The visual effects weren't finished. Many of the ghosts hadn't even been created yet. Every day mattered. Editors worked around the clock. Effects artists slept at their desks. Entire sequences were still being completed while promotional campaigns had already begun. It was a race against time unlike anything the filmmakers had ever experienced before. And perhaps the biggest challenge was still ahead, because creating believable ghosts in 1984 meant doing something that seems almost impossible today. There were no powerful home computers, no digital animation studios, no AI. If the audience was going to believe in ghosts, someone had to build them by hand. By the spring of 1984, the cast was in place, the cameras had been rolling for months, New York City had embraced the production. But there was one enormous problem. The stars of the movie hadn't been created yet, the ghosts. Today, filmmakers can create almost anything with a computer. Entire worlds, dinosaurs, aliens, monsters. With just a few clicks, anything is possible. But in 1984, there was no shortcut. If audiences were going to believe in ghosts, someone had to invent them. Walk into one of the special effects workshops during the making of Ghostbusters, and you'd think you'd entered another world. Artists were sculpting monsters from clay. Others were painting latex skin by hand. Mechanical engineers built moving puppets. Miniature city blocks filled long tables. Wires hung from the ceilings. Buckets of slime sat waiting to be poured. Nothing existed inside a computer. If a ghost needed glowing eyes, someone painted them. If a monster needed moving jaws, someone built them. If slime dripped down a hallway, someone had to clean it up between takes. It wasn't glamorous, it was craftsmanship, and it would become one of the reasons Ghostbusters still feels so real today. Now, let's talk about everyone's favorite gluttonous ghost, Slimer. Believe it or not, he almost looked completely different. Early designs made him much scarier, more frightening, almost monstrous. But Ivan Reitman had another idea. He wanted a ghost that audiences would actually enjoy watching. Something gross, but funny. The artists experimented over and over, different shapes, different faces, different expressions. Eventually they landed on the round, green, constantly hungry ghost we know today. The crew affectionately nicknamed him the Ghost of John Belushi, not because he looked like Belushi, but because his larger-than-life appetite and mischievous personality reminded them of their late friend. Slimer wasn't elegant, he wasn't graceful, he left trails of slime wherever he went, and somehow audiences loved him. He would go on to become one of the franchise's most recognizable characters. Then came the question, how do you end a movie about ghosts? The answer was something no one expected, a giant marshmallow. Even today, it sounds ridiculous. A 35-foot Stay Puft Marshmallow Man marching through Manhattan? It shouldn't work. On paper, it almost sounds silly. But that's exactly why it does. The idea came from Dan Aykroyd's wonderfully unpredictable imagination. He believed the final villain shouldn't be terrifying. It should be completely innocent, something everyone recognized, something impossible to fear, until it started crushing buildings. The filmmakers built detailed miniature city streets. A performer climbed into a carefully designed Stay Puft suit. Smoke, explosions, miniatures, forced perspective. Every trick in the filmmaking playbook came together. And somehow, audiences believed a smiling marshmallow mascot was destroying New York. It's one of those ideas that only Ghostbusters could get away with. Of course, every superhero needs a signature weapon. Batman had his variety of gadgets. Indiana Jones had his whip. The Ghostbusters had proton packs. Those glowing beams of energy became one of the movie's defining images. Creating them wasn't easy. The actors wore heavy backpacks that contained lights, wiring, and electronics to help sell the illusion. The streams themselves were added later using painstaking optical effects. Frame by frame by frame, every blast of proton energy required countless hours of work. And then there was the famous warning, don't cross the streams. The audience doesn't really know what it means, neither do the Ghostbusters, but somehow everyone immediately understands it's dangerous, very dangerous. Sometimes great storytelling leaves just enough mystery for our imagination to fill in the blanks. Then there was the vehicle, the Ecto-1. Long before it became one of the most recognizable cars in movie history, it was a retired 1959 Cadillac ambulance. The production team transformed it into something unforgettable. Sirens, roof racks, ladders, warning lights, ghost hunting equipment bolted to every available surface. It looked like a cross between a fire truck, a science experiment, and someone's very ambitious garage project. Whenever it drove through New York, people stopped and stared. Many had no idea a movie was being filmed. They simply saw a bizarre white Cadillac racing through traffic and wondered what on earth was happening. Today, it's impossible to imagine Ghostbusters without it. The Ecto-1 became as beloved as the characters themselves. Of course, every hero needs a headquarters. Batman had his Batcave, Indiana Jones had his university office. The Ghostbusters? They had an old firehouse tucked away in the heart of New York City. It was the perfect home, weathered, practical, a little run down, and full of character. But here's something many fans don't realize. The Ghostbusters headquarters was actually two different places. The famous exterior, the one with the towering red garage doors where the Ecto-1 races in and out, was filmed at a real working fire station in Lower Manhattan. Firefighters were still responding to emergencies, while a Hollywood film crew transformed the building into one of the most famous addresses in movie history. The interior, however, wasn't there at all. Those scenes, the offices, the basement, the laboratory, the towering fire pole, were recreated on a soundstage thousands of miles away in Los Angeles. Movie magic stitched the two locations together so seamlessly that audiences have spent decades believing they were one and the same. That's one of the quiet miracles of filmmaking. When it's done well, you never notice. Think about that firehouse for a moment. It's not glamorous, the walls are worn, the floors are scuffed. The equipment looks as though it's been assembled one piece at a time. It feels lived in, real. Almost as if four scientists really did move into an abandoned fire station and slowly build a ghost-catching business from scratch. That authenticity mattered, because if the headquarters felt believable, then maybe, just maybe, the ghosts did too. The firehouse wasn't just where the Ghostbusters worked, it became a fifth member of the team. More than 40 years later, fans from around the world still make the journey to that little corner of New York City. They stand outside the famous garage doors. They recreate movie scenes. They pose for photographs beside the Ghostbusters logo. They even arrive dressed in full suit, complete with homemade proton packs strapped to their backs. For many, it's more than just a filming location. It's a place where childhood memories come rushing back. A reminder of Saturday afternoons, VHS tapes, summer vacations, and a time when four unlikely heroes convinced us that ghosts might actually be real. Not bad for an old firehouse that was simply doing its job before Hollywood came calling. But while the firehouse became a legend, the people behind the scenes were running out of time. The release date was approaching, the ghost still needed finishing, the visual effects artists were working day and night, because making Ghostbusters was becoming just as frantic as chasing the ghosts themselves. As filming came to an end, the pressure only increased. The artists continued to work around the clock, sleeping inside the studio. Editors were still assembling scenes while other teams finished ghost effects. There were moments when completed shots were arriving almost at the last possible minute. It wasn't unusual for filmmakers in the 1980s to work under pressure, but this was something else. Everyone knew they were making something unusual. No one knew if audiences would embrace it, though. Would people laugh? Would they be scared? Would they understand this strange mix of comedy, science fiction, and the supernatural? No one could answer those questions. There was only one thing left to do: open the movie and hope the world was ready to answer one simple question. June 8th, 1984, it's opening day across North America. People begin lining up outside movie theaters. Some have seen the trailers, others simply know it's a new comedy starring Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd. No one has any idea they're about to witness the birth of a pop culture phenomenon. The lights dim, the Columbia Pictures logo appears, the library ghost floats across the screen, and for the next 2 hours, audiences laugh, jump, fall in love with four ordinary guys who somehow became extraordinary heroes. When the credits roll, people don't rush home. They stand in the lobby talking about what they just saw. Did you see that Marshmallow Man? That green ghost was hilarious. I need one of those proton packs. Something special had happened, and within weeks, the entire world knew it. Every great movie needs a great theme song. Ghostbusters got one of the greatest. But here's something many people don't know. Ray Parker Jr. only had a few days to write it. The filmmakers wanted something audiences would remember the instant they left the theater. Something fun, catchy, something that could be sung by anyone. Ray Parker Jr. later said the inspiration came from late-night television commercials. Simple, memorable, easy to repeat. Then he asked one question: who are you going to call? The answer became one of the most recognizable choruses in movie history. Suddenly, it was everywhere. On the radio, at birthday parties, in shopping malls, baseball games. Kids shouted it on the playgrounds. Adults sang it at work. Even if you hadn't seen the movie, you knew the song. And once you heard it, good luck getting it out of your head. The success of Ghostbusters reached far beyond movie theaters. Suddenly, toy stores couldn't keep Ghostbusters merchandise on the shelves. Kids raced through backyards wearing homemade proton packs made from cardboard boxes and garden hoses. Halloween costumes appeared everywhere. Lunchboxes, action figures, comic books, video games, and just 2 years later, Saturday mornings belonged to the real Ghostbusters. For an entire generation, being a Ghostbuster wasn't something you watched, it was something you pretended to be. Living rooms became haunted houses. Basements became abandoned hotels. Every strange noise in the attic just might be Slimer. The movie had done something remarkable. It hadn't simply entertained children, it had invited them to play. Hollywood noticed. Until Ghostbusters, studios often believed comedy and special visual effects didn't belong together. Big special effects were reserved for science fiction or adventure films. Comedies stayed small. Ghostbusters changed that. It proved audiences were willing to believe the impossible, as long as they believed the characters. Its success paved the way for an entirely new kind of blockbuster. funny, exciting, heartfelt, and just a little weird. More importantly, it reminded filmmakers that sometimes the strangest ideas become the most unforgettable. After all, who would have predicted that a giant smiling marshmallow would become one of cinema's greatest villains? After these 40 years have passed, technology has changed, special effects have become almost limitless, movies have become louder, bigger, faster, yet somehow Ghostbusters still works today. Why? I don't think it's because of the ghosts or the slime or even the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. It's because underneath all of the supernatural chaos, it's a story about ordinary people. They're not superheroes, they didn't wear capes, they don't have magical powers, they're scientists. Former professor, a guy looking for a paycheck, friends trying to build a business from an old firehouse. When the world needs saving, they don't wait for someone else. They answer the call themselves. Maybe that's why we love them for so long. Because deep down, we all like to believe that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And you know, there's something wonderfully comforting about Ghostbusters. Every time we watch it, we're transported back to a simpler time. A time when summer blockbusters felt like major events, and families lined up at the theater. One would spend the entire ride home talking about our favorite scenes. Maybe you saw Ghostbusters on opening weekend in 1984, or maybe you rented a VHS at a local mom-and-pop video store, or maybe you discovered it years later and wondered how a movie made decades before you were even born could still feel so fresh. That's the mark of a true classic. Because Ghostbusters was never really about catching ghosts. It was about friendship, optimism, and having the courage to face something that seems impossible, even when you're making it up as you go. Thanks for joining me again for another journey through the stories behind the movies and television shows that shaped a generation. If today's episode brought back memories of Slimer or the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, or hearing someone ask who you gonna call, I'd love it if you'd follow the podcast, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who still knows every word to that unforgettable theme song. Until next time, keep celebrating the stories that made us laugh. Keep holding on to the memories that made childhood magical. And remember, when life gets a little strange, sometimes the best thing you can do is answer the call.